Li Jian nodded and immediately took the fruit. He sensed a strange and enticing fragrance, one he had never experienced before, which made him lose control over his body. He grasped the fruit and slowly ate it. From the corner of his mouth oozed a slimy substance like blood, but after finishing the fruit, he truly felt his body brimming with strength, and the feelings of hunger and cold had completely vanished. Yuan Kongye said to Li Jian, "Your mission is to use your power to nurture this holy tree. Only when it becomes strong and flourishing can we cultivate more followers." Li Jian nodded decisively. "Yes, I will follow your orders, leader." He approached the base of the tree, drew a small knife from his person, and cut his finger. Even though it was just a small wound, his blood flowed like a stream. The holy tree greedily absorbed every drop of his blood, and the strange blue light on the trunk became even more radiant. Yuan Kongye didn't let Li Jian continue bleeding, he approached and used his power to stop the bleeding. "From now on, you must use your blood daily to nurture the holy tree, this is your glorious mission." Li Jian nodded. In his eyes shone a noble and profound expression, as if this task had become an important and meaningful part of his life. In the blink of an eye, a month had passed. Zhang Yi, in hiding, had once again built up defenses of ice and snow. Over time, with no new enemies appearing, people began to enjoy their daily lives. However, Zhang Yi, despite living in peace, did not forget the situation he was in. Every day, he spent a few hours practicing martial arts with Liang Yu. Uncle Vu and Su Chunlei also joined the training to strengthen their bodies. Liang Yu had become more mature and less talkative, and during training, she often taught Zhang Yi with a serious demeanor. However, during interactions, her face would often unconsciously blush. After a tiring training session, Su Chunlei thought to himself, Liang Yu, like the boss, has the ability to devour abilities. Previously, they had absorbed powers from other mutants, and their strength began to increase. He and Uncle Vu didn't have that ability and didn't feel anything special. Now that Liang Yu also possesses that power, it proves that even among mutants, there is a division of talent levels, and he and Uncle Vu clearly belong to the less gifted category. Therefore, Su Chunlei had tirelessly trained to enhance his combat strength. Thinking this, he stood up and continued his training. Su Chunlei was very determined. However, no matter how he trained, the results were not significant. His methods mainly involved using skills like ice wall, snowstorm, and other techniques for controlling the battlefield and causing disruption, which were quite effective. In a one-on-one fight, he didn't think he had the ability to win against anyone. "I can't continue like this. If I do, every time I fight, I will have to rely solely on luck." Seeing Su Chunlei's painful efforts, Zhang Yi approached and shared his own training experience. The more you use your abilities, the more proficient and powerful they become. But the most important thing is to have a strategy. Zhang Yi pointed to his head. If you consider abilities as weapons, besides strengthening the weapon, we must also have the intelligence to control it. A master throwing a small stone is more dangerous than an ordinary person firing a gun. Zhang Yi's explanation gave Su Chunlei a clear insight. He thought to himself, I was too worried about the power of my abilities. Like last time, the boss defeated two bases not by strength but by information and wisdom. Su Chunlei understood. He said with determination, I can't absorb the abilities of other mutants, so I have a certain limit. But if I can fully utilize my abilities, they will still be very powerful. After changing his perspective, Su Chunlei began to see everything more clearly and wisely. In the blink of an eye, another month had passed, and the weather was still freezing. At the ruins of the Shishan base, the place was covered in dust, making it uninhabitable. The supplies inside had been looted by Zhang Yi. However, one day, the heavy iron door suddenly shook violently. It seemed as though some powerful, mysterious force was shaking it. After just a few strong and fierce impacts, the door was broken. In the dark space, a green light flickered, emitting a stench that made one want to vomit. From the door slowly stepped out a group of corpses with tattered bodies and hollow eyes. Zombies appeared in massive numbers, quickly occupying the entire passageway. They seemed to be driven by some kind of force, slowly moving towards the door of the Shishan base. Outside, the blizzard was raging. Zombies from the Shishan base were pouring out in their thousands, heading towards Zhang Yi's manor. Meanwhile, Zhang Yi sat in his hideout on a sofa, sipping coffee and chatting with Yang Xinxin. Yang Xinxin had a laptop on her lap, slowly providing Zhang Yi with information about the recent activities of the four other factions. Over the past month, she had hacked into their networks and secretly monitored their every move from the shadows. Unlike the Shishan base, their cybersecurity systems were much weaker, even just at the standard of a domestic company. The Qingpu base and Baishue sect didn't even have dedicated cybersecurity personnel, they relied on phones and satellites to transmit information. For Yang Xinxin, a professional hacker, infiltrating their networks was extremely easy. Xinxin reported that based on the current situation, the Qingpu base still chose stability and to protect what they had. They had no intention of expanding and were quite satisfied with their current territory. After the Zhaoyu base's defeat in battle, their leader, Wei Dinghai, was seriously injured and became more cautious. He always stayed within his defensive lines, which even allowed other armed factions to appear in their territory. Yang Sheng's base maintained its dominant position and ruthlessly suppressed several rebellions within their territory. As for the Baishue sect, they could be considered the biggest winners. After the Great Battle, their membership was rapidly increasing and could soon reach over 100,000 people. Zhang Yi sat on the sofa listening to Yang Xinxin's report. Nothing was too surprising except for the information about the Baishue sect, which made him extremely curious. They were recruiting followers like mad. What would they rely on to sustain them? A human typically varied from young to old, male to female. Not everyone could become a useful warrior or laborer. Many people wouldn't necessarily be useful and could even become a burden. Even other bases and organizations, even with relatively abundant supplies, had to maintain a certain population size. Zhang Yi furrowed his brows, pondering the significance of this action. Could Yuan Kongye really see himself as the savior of the world? Yang Xinxin looked at Zhang Yi and said nonchalantly, actually, there is another possibility. Zhang Yi looked up, intrigued. Oh, please explain further. Yang Xinxin calmly explained, now is an apocalyptic era, even tougher than chaotic times. Typically, during such periods, the world order undergoes significant changes. Zhang Yi, you might not have grand ambitions and just wish to live a peaceful life, but that doesn't mean others with power think the same way. Yang Xinxin continued, perhaps Baishue sect also intends to quickly become the leading force in the city. When their number of followers is large enough and their doctrine spreads widely, then even the three major bases or us could be assimilated. Yang Xinxin concluded, in theory, someone in Baishue sect wants to rebuild faith and become a deity in this disordered apocalyptic world. Zhang Yi smiled lightly, not believing it. The idea sounded ridiculous, but Yang Xinxin was very serious. Trust me, this is no joke. In extreme situations, people will grasp at any chance of survival. Even though the city's residents are quite educated, when faced with life and death, they will be ready to kneel. Zhang Yi crossed his arms and looked into the distance. He glanced out the window and shook his head. I acknowledge your reasoning, but the times have changed. Zhang Yi sighed. A large number of people alone is not enough to dominate everything. Even if the Baishue sect truly has over 100,000 members, they still can't gain an absolute advantage over other factions that possess modern weapons. Yang Xinxin turned to Zhang Yi and asked, what if they use Yuan Kongye's blessing ability to awaken more mutants? This question made Zhang Yi frown in thought. It was indeed a matter worth considering. However, he quickly gave his response. Mutants are just slightly stronger humans. There's no need to deify them excessively like gods. Moreover, I know a lot about mutants, and only a few are truly powerful enough to be terrifying. But Yang Xinxin looked at him with admiration. You say that because you have become very strong now. Zhang Yi, who possessed the space ability, had absorbed many powerful mutants, including some of the top fighters from the Xishan base. The extent of Zhang Yi's current strength was something no one dared to assert. But he himself knew best. In recent battles with the bases, he had never had to exert his full strength. Zhang Yi patted his thigh gently and, with a profound look, gazed out the window. The Baishue sect. We need to be careful with this sect. As he was speaking, Zhang Yi's eyes suddenly became sharp. He sensed someone approaching through the blizzard. From the distant horizon, vague silhouettes appeared, slowly advancing towards them. Zhang Yi looked at the scene before him, stunned. For a moment, he felt like he was seeing things. In such freezing conditions, how could so many people appear at once? Even in previous military battles, the number of soldiers gathered here was not this large. But as he looked more closely, he realized it was not an illusion. A very large group of people was indeed moving towards them. Zhang Yi suddenly jumped up from the sofa and shouted, alert everyone in the hideout to quickly gather in the living room and get equipped. While speaking, Zhang Yi hurriedly retrieved a gun from his dimensional space. Zhang Yi changed his clothes and headed towards the living room. Yang Xinxin asked in surprise, what's going on? Zhang Yi, holding the gun, stared intently out the window and said, look carefully outside. Is there something appearing? Yang Xinshin wheeled herself closer to the window. She squinted and observed carefully. Finally, she recognized that along the horizon, many people were indeed approaching. Yang Xinshin's face turned pale instantly. Why are there so many people? Where are they coming from? Could it be that other forces are joining together to attack us?